Pregnant and abandoned, she slept under a tree with the cold ground as her only certainty. No one offered help, until a rich, quiet and mysterious man stopped in front of her. He made no promises, but opened the door to a house and to a new life. What began as shelter became family, and silenced those who swore she didn't deserve a second chance. If this story interests you, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and tell us what city you're watching from. We continue. I promise this will be the best story you'll hear in your life. The rain fell relentlessly that June night in Chicago. Emily walked through the deserted streets of downtown, her solitary figure reflected in the puddles forming on the asphalt. At 22, she carried 7 months of life in her womb, and the weight of all the choices that had brought her here. The thin jacket she wore barely protected her protruding belly from the cold wind cutting through the Chicago dawn. "Everything will be all right, little one," she murmured to the baby as she walked aimlessly, trying to ignore the drops running down her face, mixing with silent tears. Just 3 hours earlier, Emily had faced the stern gaze of her father, Richard Thompson, a respected businessman and man of traditional values. The late discovery of her pregnancy had been the trigger for an argument that culminated in an ultimatum. Either she left that shame behind, or she left the house where she'd grown up. "Dad, I can't do that." "It's my child," Emily pleaded, while her mother, Karen, watched the scene with tearful eyes, unable to intervene against her husband's will. "Then you're no longer my daughter," Richard sentenced, pointing to the door. "You have until tomorrow to decide or to leave." Emily didn't wait until the next day. She took only what she could carry in a backpack, some clothes, documents, and the savings she had, and headed for the home of Tyler, the father of the baby she carried. The young man, a law student from a wealthy family, had promised support when he learned about the pregnancy. "We'll face this together," he had said months ago, holding her hands with apparent conviction. However, upon arriving at Tyler's apartment in Lincoln Park, Emily found not only her boyfriend but also his parents. The scenario that unfolded was a cruel repetition of what she had just lived through. Recriminations, accusations of irresponsibility, and finally, Tyler's cowardice manifesting in words she would never forget. "I can't risk my future for a mistake. Emily, my father is right, we're not in a position to start a family now, I'm not ready." Thus, twice abandoned in the same night, Emily wandered the downtown streets. The money she had wouldn't be enough for more than a few nights in a cheap motel, and without a steady job, she had left her internship at an art gallery to focus on her university studies. Her prospects were bleak. The rain increased in intensity, forcing her to seek shelter under the awning of an old building. The clock of the central cathedral chimed 4 times, reminding her that dawn was still hours away. Exhaustion overcame her, and, sitting on the cold ground with her backpack as an improvised pillow, Emily fell asleep, one hand protectively resting on her belly. A gentle touch on her shoulder woke her. The dim light of morning revealed a man of about 50, wearing a dark overcoat, who observed her with an expression that mixed concern and respect. "Miss, are you all right? Do you need help?" Emily took a few seconds to process where she was and who this stranger was. Instinctively, she moved away, suspicious. "I'm fine, thank you," she responded automatically, trying to stand with difficulty. "Forgive my intrusion, but you don't seem well," the man insisted, maintaining a respectful distance. "My name is Michael Rogers. I own this building and was arriving for a meeting when I saw you. It's not safe for anyone, especially for a young woman in your condition, to sleep on the street." There was something in Michael's deep voice and direct gaze that didn't suggest threat, but Emily remained cautious. A lifetime of warnings about the dangers of the world echoed in her mind. "I appreciate your concern, Mr. Rogers, but I'm just resting. I was just leaving," she lied, adjusting her backpack on her shoulder. Michael observed her attentively. His eyes, a deep brown marked by small wrinkles at the corners, seemed to see beyond her words. "There's a cafe on the corner that opens early. So at least let me offer you breakfast. Afterward, you can go on your way if that's what you want." Emily's stomach involuntarily protested. She hadn't eaten since lunch the day before, and hunger was beginning to make itself uncomfortably known. With reluctance, she accepted. Just breakfast, she conditioned. The small cafe was almost empty at that hour of the morning. Seated at a table away from others, with a view of the square that was beginning to come to life with the first workers, Michael ordered a complete breakfast, fresh bread, cheese, fruit, juice, and coffee without consulting the menu. "Do you frequent this place regularly?" asked Emily, noticing the familiarity with which the waitress greeted him. "I've been coming here almost every day for more than 10 years, he replied with a slight smile. "I live and work in the area." While they ate, Michael didn't ask invasive questions. He talked about trivial matters, the weather, changes in the neighborhood, a new museum that had been inaugurated nearby. His discretion allowed Emily to gradually relax, and she was surprised to find herself enjoying the first peaceful meal in days. At the end of the meal, as Emily was preparing to thank him and depart for the uncertain, Michael finally addressed her situation. "Emily, I won't ask what led you to sleep on the street. Everyone has their stories and their reasons. But I would like to make a proposal," he said with seriousness. "I have a guest house at the back of my residence. It's a simple space, but comfortable and completely independent. It's empty at the moment, and you can use it for as long as you need, without commitments or obligations." Suspicion immediately returned to Emily's eyes. "Why would you do that for a stranger?" Michael took a deep breath before answering. His eyes briefly drifted to the window, as if searching for something on the city horizon. "Because a long time ago someone did the same for me when I needed it most, and because I believe that sometimes all we need is a safe place to reorganize our thoughts and find our way." Emily studied the face of the man in front of her, looking for signs of ulterior motives or falsehood. She found only an almost disconcerting sincerity. "You don't even know me. What if I'm a con artist or a thief?" Michael smiled, a smile that lit up his eyes in an almost youthful way. "I have good judgment about people. Besides, the house doesn't have much to be stolen, and you clearly have more important concerns right now," he said, with a respectful look at her belly. After a long silence, in which she weighed all her alternatives, practically non-existent, Emily accepted the offer. "Temporarily," she stipulated, "until I can get organized." "Naturally," Michael agreed. "The space is yours for as long as you need." As they drove in Michael's car toward the West Town neighborhood, a wooded and quiet area of Chicago's West Side, Emily wondered if she was committing an act of madness by trusting a stranger. However, something in this man's behavior, his non-invasive delicacy, his respect for her silences, transmitted a security that she couldn't explain rationally. What Emily didn't know was that that rainy morning would mark the beginning of a profound transformation in her life, and that Michael Rogers held secrets and stories that would intertwine with hers in ways that neither could predict. Michael Rogers' main house was a modern construction with large windows that allowed abundant natural light. Situated at the top of a small elevation and surrounded by a well-maintained garden, the residence had a privileged view of the city. However, it was not there that he led Emily. Following a stone path that wound through the back garden, they arrived at a smaller construction separated from the main house. The so-called guest house turned out to be a charming two-story cottage with exposed brick walls, large windows, and a small porch covered by flowering vines. "Here it is," announced Michael, opening the door. "I hope it's adequate." Emily couldn't disguise her surprise upon entering. She had expected something simple, perhaps even Spartan, but the interior of the cottage was cozy and carefully decorated. The living room, integrated with a small kitchen, had comfortable furniture, shelves with books, pictures on the walls, and even an old piano in one of the corners. A spiral staircase led to the upper floor where presumably the bedrooms were located. "It's beautiful," murmured Emily, turning slowly to absorb all the details. "It looks like something out of a movie." "My wife decorated this space," explained Michael with a smile that didn't completely reach his eyes. "She had a special talent for making any place cozy." The use of the verb in the past tense didn't go unnoticed by Emily, but she chose not to comment. Instead, she asked, "Your wife won't mind my presence here?" A brief and dense silence preceded the response. "Sarah left us 5 years ago. A cerebral aneurysm, sudden and without warning." "I'm sorry," said Emily, sincerely touched by the pain contained in those simple words. "Life goes on," he replied, with a resignation that seemed the result of much effort. "The kitchen is stocked with the basics. There are clean linens in the closets and towels in the bathroom. If you need anything specific, just let me know." Before Michael could leave, he was interrupted by a female voice from the door. "So the young lady accepted your offer, Mr. Rogers?" The woman who entered was around 60, with grey hair tied in a simple bun and a posture that combined dignity and accessibility. She wore practical clothes and carried a basket covered with an embroidered cloth. "Ah, Mrs. Jones, good that you arrived," Michael greeted. "This is Emily. Emily, I present to you Martha Jones, housekeeper of the main house, and the one truly responsible for keeping my life in order." Mrs. Jones evaluated Emily with perceptive but not invasive eyes. Her gaze lingered for a moment on the young woman's belly before returning to her face with a welcoming smile. "Welcome, dear. I brought some things for lunch. I imagine a good vegetable soup with meat and fresh rice would be nice after last night's rain, wouldn't it?" Emily's stomach answered with an audible rumble, drawing laughter from all three. The tension that hung in the air dissipated a little. "I think that's a yes," joked Mrs. Jones, already heading to the small kitchen to organize what she had brought. "Mr. Rogers told me you're expecting a baby. How many months?" "7, replied Emily, automatically placing her hand on her belly. "It's a boy." "A boy," exclaimed Mrs. Jones with genuine enthusiasm. "Do you have a name already?" Emily hesitated. "I'm still deciding." The housekeeper nodded without asking more questions. Her discretion seemed to mirror Michael's, as if both shared a tacit code of respect for others' spaces and silences. Michael checked his watch. "I need to go to the office, but I'll be back for dinner. Mrs. Jones will be around if you need anything. My number is written next to the phone, and there's Wi-Fi available. The password is on the same paper." After his departure, Emily observed Mrs. Jones moving around the small kitchen with efficiency and familiarity. There was something comforting in her solid and practical presence. "Has Mr. Rogers always been like this?" asked Emily, sitting on a stool near the counter. "Like what?" Mrs. Jones returned, without interrupting her tasks. "Like this, generous with strangers." The housekeeper smiled, a smile that revealed deep knowledge. "Mr. Rogers has a good heart, always has, but there's more to his story than appears at first sight, as in all stories, by the way." Emily realized she wouldn't get more direct information and decided not to insist. Instead, she offered to help with lunch, which was gently refused. "In your condition, the best thing you can do is rest. There's a prepared room upstairs. Why don't you take a hot shower and rest a bit while I prepare everything? We can talk afterward." The suggestion was too tempting to refuse. After finding the room, a cozy space decorated in soft tones of blue and green with a comfortable bed and a small balcony overlooking the garden, Emily enjoyed a long hot shower. The water seemed to wash away not just physical fatigue, but some of the accumulated anguish. Dressed in clean clothes from her backpack, she lay on the soft bed and, before she could process the extraordinary events of that day, fell into a deep sleep. When she awoke, the golden light of late afternoon entered through the partly open curtains. For a moment, Emily didn't recognize where she was, and panic threatened to overcome her. Then, the memories of the morning returned, and she relaxed against the pillows. The aroma of homemade food rose up the stairs, reminding her that she hadn't had lunch. She got up, tidied her brown hair into a simple ponytail, and descended the spiral staircase. Mrs. Jones was in the living room, setting the small dining table with a white tablecloth and simple but elegant dinnerware. "Ah, you're awake. Did you sleep well?" she asked with a warm smile. "Lunch has turned into dinner, but it's hot and ready to be served." "Did I sleep that long?" Emily was astonished, noticing for the first time that the sun was already setting. Like a rock, I went up to call you for lunch and didn't have the heart to wake you. Of course, you needed that rest." Before they could continue the conversation, the sound of a door opening announced Michael's arrival. He entered carrying a medium-sized cardboard box, which he carefully deposited on the sofa before greeting them. "Sorry for the delay. The traffic was chaotic," he explained, removing his coat. "How was your day, Emily? Did you manage to rest?" The normality of the question, as if they were old acquaintances sharing an established routine, momentarily disconcerted Emily. It was strange to be there, in that house that seemed straight out of a tale, with these people who treated her with a kindness she no longer expected to find. "I slept practically the whole day," she admitted, a bit embarrassed. "I guess I was more tired than I thought." "Your body knows what it needs," commented Michael naturally, especially now. During dinner, a nutritious soup accompanied by rice, a colorful salad, and homemade bread, conversation flowed surprisingly easily. Michael asked about her interests and studies, and Emily found herself talking about her visual arts course, interrupted in the penultimate semester due to the pregnancy, and about her previous work as an intern at a contemporary art gallery. "I've always been fascinated by how art can express what words can't," she explained, becoming animated when talking about her passion, especially photography. "There's something magical about capturing a moment that will never be repeated exactly the same way." Michael's eyes shone with genuine interest. Sarah thought the same way. She was an art restorer at the Museum of Modern Art. She used to say that each brushstroke tells a story about the artist and their time. The casual mention of his deceased wife, without the weight of sadness that had accompanied the first reference, surprised Emily. It was as if, by sharing that memory with her, Michael transformed the pain of absence into a celebration of what Sarah had represented. After dinner, when Mrs. Jones had already retired to her own home, an apartment nearby, as Emily discovered, Michael showed her the contents of the box he had brought. "I thought you might need some things," he explained as he removed maternity clothes, personal hygiene products, a pair of comfortable slippers, and some books about pregnancy and baby care from the box. Emily felt her throat tighten with emotion. That gesture of consideration, so simple and at the same time so significant, dramatically contrasted with the abandonment she had suffered from the people she expected support from. "I don't know how to thank you," she murmured, fighting against the tears that threatened to fall. Michael shook his head, averting his gaze as if uncomfortable with the gratitude. "There's nothing to thank me for. They're just practical things you'll need." A comfortable silence established itself between them, filled only by the soft sound of the rain that had returned outside. Emily felt strangely at peace, as if she had found a safe harbor amid the storm her life had become. Later, already in her room, Emily sat in the small armchair by the window, observing the raindrops drawing patterns on the glass. Her hand rested on her belly where the baby moved gently. "It seems we got lucky, little one," she whispered to her son. "But we can't get too comfortable. This is temporary, remember? We need to have our own path." As she spoke, however, part of her questioned whether it would really be so easy to leave this place and these people who, in less than a day, had already shown more consideration for her well-being than her own family. In her old life, Emily Thompson had had everything money could buy, but had never felt the type of genuine welcome she was experiencing now. It was ironic that she had to lose everything to find something she didn't even know she was seeking. Across the garden, in the main house, Michael Rogers also observed the rain from his porch, a glass of whiskey in his hand and distant thoughts in his eyes. What Emily couldn't know was that, for him, her presence in that house represented much more than a simple act of charity. It was a chance at redemption, an opportunity to correct mistakes from the past that had haunted him for decades. Days transformed into weeks, and weeks into a whole month. Emily, who had initially planned to stay only as long as necessary to find a job and a place of her own to live, found herself gradually integrated into the routine of that house and those people. Her body, now in the 8th month of pregnancy, had adapted to the tranquil rhythm of the cottage, the morning walks in the garden, and the nutritious meals prepared by Mrs. Jones. The housekeeper had become a constant presence in her life, a mixture of mentor and mother figure that Emily didn't know she needed. It was Mrs. Jones who took her to the obstetrician recommended by a friend, who organized a small layette for the baby, and who patiently taught her basic notions of newborn care. "My mother was a midwife in rural Kentucky," explained Mrs. Jones, "one afternoon while teaching Emily to fold cloth diapers. I grew up watching life begin in various ways. There's nothing more beautiful than a birth, nor stronger than a woman bringing a life into the world." Those simple words, spoken with the wisdom of someone who had lived enough to understand the cycles of existence, calmed Emily's growing fears about childbirth and motherhood. The young woman discovered in Mrs. Jones an inexhaustible source of stories, practical advice, and that type of knowledge not found in books, but transmitted from woman to woman through generations. Michael, for his part, maintained a more discreet presence but equally constant. Although he spent much of the day at the office, Emily had discovered that he owned a publishing house specializing in art and architecture. They dined together almost every night, conversing about literature, music, art exhibitions, and gradually about their own lives. It was during one of these dinners that Michael finally shared the story that explained his gesture of welcoming her on that rainy day. "I was 19 when my father discovered I had gotten my high school girlfriend pregnant," he began, swirling the wine in his glass with a distant look. "We were young, scared, but wanted to stay together and raise our child. My father didn't see things that way. For him, it was a shame that needed to be hidden." Emily felt her heart accelerate. There was a painful symmetry between his story and her own. "What happened?" she asked, almost in a whisper. Michael's eyes, normally calm, acquired an intensity that mixed pain and determination. "He gave me an ultimatum. Either I forgot that girl and that child, or I would be alone in the world. I was young and cowardly. I chose to obey." The silence that followed was dense, loaded with unverbalized emotions. Emily waited, intuiting that there was more to that story. 2 years later, I learned she had given the baby up for adoption. I tried to find them, but it was too late. The records were sealed, and in those days, without the internet and with limited resources, it was practically impossible to trace a closed adoption. "You never saw them again?" asked Emily, genuinely moved. Michael shook his head negatively, a gesture loaded with decades of regret. "I spent years searching. I hired detectives, combed through records, followed every possible lead. To this day, I don't know if my son or daughter is alive, if they had a good life, if someday they'll forgive me for not fighting for them." The pieces of the puzzle were beginning to fit together for Emily. The carefully decorated cottage, the collection of children's books on the shelf, the additional room upstairs that remained closed, they were all traces of a wait that never ended. "Is that why you helped me that day? When I saw you sleeping on the street, protecting your belly with such care, even in such adverse circumstances, it was like seeing the ghost of what could have happened to Jennifer, my child's mother. And I thought that, maybe, by helping you, I could somehow compensate for what I didn't do in the past." Michael's confession altered something fundamental in the dynamic between them. They were no longer just benefactor and beneficiary, but two people united by parallel experiences of abandonment and search for redemption. Emily felt, for the first time since she had arrived at that house, truly at ease to share her own story. The complicated relationship with her authoritarian parents, the relationship with Tyler, the dreams interrupted by prejudice and others' cowardice. In the weeks that followed, a comfortable routine established itself between them. Michael began to work more frequently from home, using the small office in the main residence. Emily, in turn, rediscovered her passion for photography, using an old camera she had found on the cottage shelf, a model that, as she discovered, later had belonged to Sarah. "She would want you to use it," Michael assured when Emily expressed concern about using something so personal. Sarah believed that creative objects should always be in hands that could give them life. With the approach of childbirth, Emily finally gathered the courage to do something she had been postponing: call her mother. The call was answered on E. The third ring, and the sound of her mother's voice, hesitant, anxious, awakened an avalanche of contradictory emotions. "Honey, is it really you? Thank God. We've been looking for you for weeks." The conversation that followed was difficult, permeated by tears and recriminations, but also by an undeniable relief on both sides. Karen confessed that she had seriously argued with Richard after her daughter's departure, and that the patriarch, although still resistant, was beginning to question his intransigent position. "Your father isn't a bad man, Emily," Karen tried to explain. "He's just afraid of what he doesn't understand, what he can't control. Deep down, he misses you." "I'm not ready to see him, Mom," Emily responded with honesty. "But we can meet, you and I. There are things I need to tell you in person." The meeting was set for the following week at a neutral cafe downtown. When she told Michael about the conversation, Emily was surprised by his enthusiastic reaction. "It's an important beginning," he said with a genuine smile. "Reconciliations are rare and precious in this life. Believe someone who lost that opportunity." On the appointed day, Emily arrived at the cafe with her heart racing and her hands slightly trembling. Michael had insisted on driving her and waited patiently outside, giving her space for the reunion but close enough if she needed support. Karen was already there, seated at a table at the back, her anxious eyes scanning each person who entered. When she finally spotted her daughter, her face lit up for a second before contracting in concern upon noticing the advanced belly. "Emily," she murmured, rising with extended arms. "My girl." The hug was awkward, Emily's belly creating a physical distance that mirrored the emotional abyss of the last few months. But there was warmth in that contact and a genuine desire for reconnection. The conversation initially floated on superficial topics: the weather, health, practical details about the pregnancy. Then, Karen addressed what really mattered. "Your father isn't well, Emily," she revealed with a low voice. "He had a minor heart attack 2 weeks ago. The doctors said it was caused by stress." The news hit Emily like a punch to the stomach. Despite everything, the idea of losing her father awakened a primal fear that she didn't know she still harbored. "Why didn't you tell me before?" she questioned, feeling somehow betrayed. "Because he didn't want me to. Actually, he doesn't even know I'm here today. But I need to tell you, Emily, he's been asking about you. At night, when he thinks I'm not listening, I find him in his office looking at your childhood photos." The emotions within Emily were complex and contradictory: resentment for the rejection, concern for her father's health, and a stubborn spark of hope that maybe there was still a possibility of reconciliation. "What do you want from me, Mom?" she finally asked. Karen's eyes filled with unshed tears. "I want you to consider seeing him. Not today, not tomorrow, but when you're ready. Before it's too late for both of you." Emily took a deep breath, feeling the baby move inside her as if participating in the conversation. "I'll think about it. That's the most I can promise right now." When they left the cafe, Karen finally noticed Michael waiting patiently in the car. "Who is that man, Emily? Where are you living? Are you safe?" The concern in her voice was genuine, and Emily felt a wave of affection for her mother, who, despite her failures and omissions, had never really stopped caring. "It's a long story, Mom. But yes, I'm safer and better cared for than I ever imagined being after that night." On the way back, Emily remained silent, processing the meeting and its implications. Michael respected her mental space, driving calmly as the afternoon fell over the city. It was only when they parked in front of the house that Emily finally spoke. "My father had a heart attack," she said, the words coming out almost against her will. "Not serious, but a warning, and apparently he misses me." Michael turned off the engine and turned to face her with seriousness. "What do you feel about that?" "I don't know," admitted Emily. "Part of me wants to believe he's truly sorry. Another part fears that if I go back, nothing will have really changed." "Life rarely gives us clear second chances," observed Michael with a soft voice. "When they appear, it's worth at least considering them." That night, alone in her room in the cottage, Emily contemplated the choices before her. The crib that Michael had personally assembled in the corner of the room was already prepared with soft sheets and a small mobile of stars. On the bedside table rested a photo album she had begun to compile, Images of the garden, the cottage, everyday details she had learned to value. This was her refuge now, a place where she had been welcomed without judgments and where, surprisingly, she felt at home. But her heart also yearned for a reconciliation with the family that, despite everything, was part of who she was. The decision she would make in the coming weeks would affect not only her future, but also that of her son. And unexpectedly, the future of Michael Rogers, a man marked by his own past of abandonments and searches for redemption. What Emily could not imagine was that forces beyond her control were already in motion, and that the universe had surprises in store that would test the newly formed bonds and bring to the surface secrets long buried. Secrets that could either destroy or solidify the fragile foundations of trust that were beginning to establish themselves in that unlikely family that destiny had brought together. The September morning dawned with a different clarity, as if nature was announcing that something special was about to happen. Emily, now with almost 9 complete months of pregnancy, awoke with a strange sensation in her lower abdomen. It wasn't pain exactly, but a persistent discomfort that came and went at irregular intervals. "They're just practice contractions," she reassured herself. Remembering the doctor's explanations at her last appointment, she decided not to alarm anyone and continue with her morning routine. During breakfast, however, Mrs. Jones noticed something in her countenance that put her on alert. "Are you feeling something different today, dear?" she asked with that sharp perception that seemed almost supernatural. "Just some discomfort, nothing major," Emily minimized, trying to smile. The housekeeper frowned, not convinced. "Discomfort like what? Regular? Does it come and go?" Before Emily could elaborate an evasive response, she felt a warm liquid running down her legs, soaking the chair and the floor under her feet. Her eyes widened in panic. "My water!" she exclaimed, her voice trembling with fear and excitement. From that moment, everything happened with surprising speed. Mrs. Jones, maintaining admirable calm, took control of the situation. With an efficiency born of experience, she helped Emily change while instructing Michael, who had appeared alarmed at the kitchen door, to prepare the car and get the bag that had been ready for weeks, awaiting this moment. "Breathe deeply." "Dear," directed Mrs. Jones as they walked slowly to the car, "remember what we practiced. Inhale through the nose, exhale through the mouth. Your body knows what to do." On the way to the hospital, the contractions intensified. Emily grabbed Michael's hand in the passenger seat, squeezing it hard with each new wave of pain. "I'm scared," she confessed, between labored breaths. Michael looked at her briefly, without diverting his attention from the road for too long. There was a tranquil certainty in his voice when he replied, "You're stronger than you imagine, Emily, and you're not alone in this. We'll be with you every step of the way." Something in the simplicity of that promise calmed her. They weren't empty words or impossible guarantees, just the naked truth. She was no longer alone. Upon arriving at the hospital, they were received by a team already alerted by Emily's obstetrician, who had been contacted by Mrs. Jones during the journey. Quickly, the young woman was accommodated in a pre-delivery room, monitored and prepared for what would come next. "Who will stay with you during labor?" asked the nurse, preparing the equipment. Emily hesitated for a moment. Traditionally, that role would be filled by her mother or by Tyler, the father of the child. But neither of them was there now. "I would like Mr. Rogers to stay with me," she decided, surprising even herself, "if he wants to, of course." Michael, who was waiting in the corridor with Mrs. Jones, entered the room with an expression that mixed honor and apprehension. "Are you sure, Emily? It's a very intimate moment." "I am," she confirmed, with a conviction that admitted no doubts. "You took me in when no one else did. I want you to be here to welcome my son too." The following hours passed in a succession of pain, exhaustion, and moments of crystalline clarity. Emily discovered an inner strength she didn't know she possessed. Each contraction seemed to test her beyond the limit, only to reveal that her limits were broader than she imagined. Michael remained tirelessly by her side, offering water, drying her sweat, repeating words of encouragement, and mainly, being a constant and calm presence amid the storm that was labor. "You're doing very well," assured the obstetrician after another examination. "The baby is in the correct position, and labor is progressing normally." Shortly after 7 in the evening, when the Chicago sky was already darkening, the contractions reached their apex. "It's time to push," announced the doctor, positioning herself. "With the next contraction, Emily, I want you to push as if you're expelling something from your body." The intensity of the next moment was almost supernatural. Emily felt simultaneously present in each cell of her body and completely separated from it, as if observing everything from an external point. The pain was transcendental, transforming into a propelling force that guided her through that ancestral portal of motherhood. When she finally felt the relief of the last contraction and heard the sharp cry that announced the arrival of her son to the world, tears flooded her eyes. The doctor placed the small being, still covered by the fluids of birth, on her chest. "Hello, my love," whispered Emily, touching the soft and reddened skin with trembling fingers. "Welcome." Michael observed the scene with misty eyes, a deep and complex emotion engraved in his features. When their gazes met over the head of the newborn, a silent communication passed between them. Gratitude, admiration, and something more. Something that didn't yet have a name, but that grew with each shared day. In the days that followed, the cottage transformed to accommodate its new resident. The room that Emily occupied officially gained a crib, a dresser with a changing table, and a nursing chair. Mrs. Jones, self-proclaimed surrogate grandmother, almost moved in, ensuring that mother and baby had everything they needed. It was, during one of those tranquil afternoons, with the baby sleeping peacefully in the crib while Emily and Michael conversed on the porch, that he finally formalized what was already evident to both. "Emily," he began with a soft seriousness in his voice, "I know that originally you came here as a temporary solution until you could establish yourself. But in these months, you both have become very important to me." Emily felt her heart accelerate, uncertain about where that conversation would lead them. "I would like you to consider staying," continued Michael. "Not as a guest, but as family. This house has enough space for both of you, and He paused, seeking the right words. "I'm not proposing to replace anyone in your son's life, but I'm offering to be a constant presence, a support, a father in the broadest sense of the word, if you allow it." The proposal was unexpected and at the same time perfectly aligned with what Emily had been feeling. In the last few months, she had experienced a type of belonging that she had never known before, neither in her parents' home, where expectations suffocated her desires, nor with Tyler, whose love proved fragile in the face of the first real challenge. Before she could respond, however, the sound of the doorbell interrupted the moment. Mrs. Jones hurried to answer and returned seconds later with a tense expression. "Emily, it's your mother, and she's not alone." The young woman's heart raced. She had talked with Karen on the phone several times since the birth of Noah, the name chosen for the boy, a tribute to the biblical figure who built the Ark of Salvation, but still didn't feel ready for a face-to-face meeting with her father. "Should I ask them to leave?" asked Michael, positioning himself protectively at her side. Emily took a deep breath, finding courage in the eyes of the man who had become her safe harbor. "No, I think it's time we face this." In the entrance hall, Karen waited with an anxious expression. At her side, Richard Thompson seemed a diminished version of the authoritarian patriarch that Emily remembered. Thinner, with deep, dark circles, and visibly grayer hair, he emanated a fragility she had never associated with him. "Honey," whispered Karen, stepping forward to hug her. "I'm sorry for coming without notice. Your father, he needed to see you." Emily remained rigid for a moment, absorbing the impact of that reunion. Then, slowly, she returned her mother's embrace before turning to her father. "Hello, Dad," she said, with a controlled voice. Richard took a hesitant step in her direction. His eyes, once always confident and authoritarian, now revealed uncertainty and a vulnerability that disarmed Emily. "Emily," he began, his voice hoarse with contained emotion. I made a terrible mistake. I don't expect you to forgive me easily, but..." His voice failed, and Emily saw something she never imagined witnessing: tears in her father's eyes. The man she had always considered unbreakable was visibly broken before her. "I heard I have a grandson," he continued after recovering. "I would very much like to meet him if you allow." The tension in the air was palpable. Michael and Mrs. Jones maintained themselves discreetly at a distance, respecting the privacy of that family moment, but ready to offer support if necessary. Emily felt a complex mixture of emotions: resentment for the abandonment, compassion for the evident fragility of her father, and a deeper understanding that only recent motherhood had brought her, that family bonds, however imperfect they may be, have a unique power of healing and transformation. "Noah is sleeping," she finally responded. "But you can see him briefly if you promise not to wake him." The relief on her parents' faces was evident. Emily led them upstairs to the room where little Noah slept peacefully in his crib. Richard, upon seeing his grandson for the first time, brought his hand to his mouth containing a sob. His misty eyes fixed on the small creature that represented the continuity of his blood, the extension of his daughter, the renewal of his family. "He's perfect," murmured Karen, embracing her husband by the shoulders. "Our family is complete again." "Not yet," responded Emily with seriousness. "We have a lot to rebuild before that, Dad. Trust isn't recovered overnight." Richard nodded, understanding the depth of the wound he had caused. "We'll take whatever time is necessary, daughter. I just ask for the chance to try." While the grandparents contemplated their sleeping grandson, Emily felt a presence at her side. Michael had silently come up, remaining at the doorway with an expression that mixed happiness for her and a touch of melancholy. "Thank you for everything," murmured Emily, intertwining her fingers with his, "for giving me space and time to reach this moment." Richard's gaze finally diverted from his grandson to the man who held his daughter's hand. The old hostility that he would have shown in similar circumstances in the past was absent. In its place there was a cautious curiosity and perhaps a beginning of gratitude. "You took care of my daughter when I failed her," he acknowledged, extending his hand to Michael. "I am eternally grateful for that." The handshake between the two men sealed a silent pact, the mutual recognition that Emily and Noah's well-being was above any personal pride or resentment. In the weeks that followed, a delicate routine was established. Emily's parents visited regularly, gradually rebuilding the fragile relationship. Richard, especially, revealed himself to be a surprisingly affectionate grandfather, compensating with his grandson for the time and love he had denied his daughter. In Seki, parallel, the relationship between Emily and Michael evolved into something deeper than friendship, more complex than gratitude, more lasting than an arrangement of convenience. They didn't put labels on it. They didn't make grand declarations. They simply allowed each shared day to solidify the bond that had formed between them. Until, on a particularly significant morning, an unexpected visit brought the last piece of the puzzle that was Emily's life. Tyler appeared at the cottage door without prior notice. He was thinner, with deep circles under his eyes, and an expression that mixed regret and determination. Emily, who had answered the door with Noah in her arms, felt a chill run down her spine. "What do you want?" she asked, without inviting him in. "To see my son," he responded simply, "and to ask your forgiveness." The conversation that followed, held on the porch of the cottage under the vigilant gaze of Michael, who observed discreetly from the main house, was an emotional roller coaster. Tyler explained that he had spent months in deep depression after abandoning her, that he had finally confronted his parents and financially broken with them to follow his own path, that he had searched for Emily everywhere possible until finally discovering her whereabouts through a mutual colleague from the university. "I don't expect you to accept me back into your life, Emily," he concluded with a trembling voice, "but I want to participate in our son's life. I want him to know he has a father who, despite having terribly failed at the beginning, is willing to love and support him for the rest of his life." Emily observed the man in front of her, the first love she had known, the biological father of her son, the author of one of the greatest pains she had experienced. She saw sincerity in his eyes, but also saw fragility. the same type of fragility that had made him abandon her when she needed him most. "You have the right to know your son, Tyler, and Noah deserves to know who his biological father is," she finally responded. "But things aren't so simple now." Calmly, she explained to Tyler about her current life, about the support of Michael and Mrs. Jones, about the ongoing reconciliation with her parents, and with gentleness but firmness, she explained that her heart now belonged to another man, one who had proven his worth not with words, but with consistent actions and constant presence. "There will always be space for you in Noah's life if you're really committed to being present," she assured. "But between us, Tyler, what existed ended that night when you chose to leave me alone." The acceptance of this reality didn't come without pain for Tyler, but it came with dignity. He understood that there were irreversible consequences for his past choices, and that the best he could do now was to build a healthy relationship with his son, respecting the new family that Emily had built. When he left, after briefly meeting his son and exchanging contacts for future visits, Emily found Michael waiting for her in the garden under the large tree that shaded the cottage, the same tree that, symbolically, represented the shelter he had offered when she had none. "Is everything all right?" he asked with that gentleness that had become a pillar in her life. Emily smiled, a full smile that reached her eyes. "Yes, it is. It finally is." They sat together on the bench under the tree, Noah, sleeping peacefully in Emily's lap. The late afternoon sun filtered through the leaves, creating golden patterns on the ground. "I never formally responded to your proposal," commented Emily, after a moment of comfortable silence. "The one you made before my parents arrived," Michael turned to face her, a mix of expectation and serenity in his gaze. "Yes, I want to stay," she continued, holding his hand in hers. "Not as a guest, not as a ward, but as a partner, as family, if the invitation is still open." Michael's response didn't come in words, but in a gentle kiss, the first they shared, full of promise, gratitude, and a love that had grown slowly, like a well-planted seed that finally blossoms. 2 months later, a small ceremony was held in the garden, under the same tree that had witnessed the beginning of their joint journey. It wasn't a traditional wedding, it was too soon for that, but a symbolic commitment, a ritual created by them to mark the formal beginning of their unconventional family. Only the closest were present, Emily's parents, now actively involved in their grandson's life, Mrs. Jones proud in her role as surrogate grandmother, Tyler fulfilling his word of being present in his son's life while respecting Emily's relationship, and some dear friends of both. Under the attentive gaze of all, especially little Noah, who observed everything with curiosity from his grandmother's lap, Emily and Michael exchanged simple but profound promises. "I promise to honor your story, respect your path and walk by your side," declared Michael with a firm voice. "Not to complete you, because you are already complete, but to share the days, the nights, the joys and the challenges. I promise to build with you a home based on trust, respect and conscious choice," responded Emily, moved. "A home where Noah grows up knowing that family isn't just blood, but also commitment, presence, and unconditional love." At the end of the ceremony, when everyone was sharing a festive meal lovingly prepared by Mrs. Jones, Richard approached Michael with a serene expression that Emily rarely saw on her father's face. "Take good care of her," asked the older man, without the tone of order that used to characterize his words. "She deserves all the happiness in the world." "It's not my function to take care of her," responded Michael with a tranquil smile. "Emily knows how to take care of herself. My privilege is to walk beside her, supporting her when she needs it and celebrating her achievements." That response, more than anything else, convinced Richard that his daughter was finally exactly where she should be. That night, after all the guests had departed and Noah was sleeping deeply in his crib, Emily and Michael sat again under the garden tree, now illuminated by small decorative lights that had been installed for the ceremony. "I still sometimes wonder if this is real," confessed Emily, leaning on his shoulder. "How a night of despair in the rain could have transformed into all this." Michael kissed the top of her head, inhaling the scent of her hair. "Life is made of cycles, Emily. Sometimes we need to lose everything to find what really matters. The full moon rose in the Chicago sky, bathing the garden with its silver light. In the house that was now truly a home, an improvised and imperfect but genuine family rested after celebrating not just a union, but a journey of rescue, reconnection, and rebirth. And under the tree that had witnessed the beginning of everything, Emily and Michael sealed with a kiss the promise that, no matter what storms might come, there would always be shelter in each other's arms. The end of the story. Dear listeners, we hope that Emily and Michael's story has deeply touched your hearts. To continue this emotional journey, we've prepared a special playlist with equally engaging and moving stories. Find it by clicking on the link to the left. If this narrative of overcoming and true love moved you, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and like this video. Every day we bring unique stories that explore the complexity of life, revealing how the most difficult moments can transform into unexpected blessings. Don't miss our upcoming content.